When a widowed woman staggered beneath the weight of 5 starving children, the last thing she expected was a quiet cowboy stepping out of a dust storm, touching his hat and saying in a voice full of gentleness and thunder, "Let me carry you now." She didn't know it yet, but that moment would change all of their lives forever. The year was 1894, and the town of Red Hollow lay half buried beneath a late spring dust storm that rolled over the plains like an angry beast refusing to die, scattering grit across rooftops, slapping shutters loose, and swallowing the horizon until it felt like the whole world had turned into a single choking breath. And yet, even in that storm, even in that ugliness, life had to keep moving. And that was exactly what Anna Mae Callister, 29, widow of the late Marshal John Callister, forced herself to do as she staggered from the general store with a sack of flour on one shoulder, a crying baby on the other, a toddler dragging behind her skirts, and 3 more children, calling for her with the desperate hunger of little ones who had learned too young that the world was not always gentle. Anna pushed her hair from her eyes, smearing dust across her forehead, and tried to hide the tremble in her hands. She couldn't break down now, not when the baby needed milk, not when her eldest boy, Isaac, was trying too hard to be brave, not when every corner of her life felt like a collapsing barn wall she had to hold up alone. John had been gone nearly 7 months, shot while protecting a stagecoach from bandits, and though the town praised his sacrifice with Sunday speeches and hollow condolences, not one of them had stepped up to help her feed 5 children, fix the roof, or keep the wolves, both the 4-legged ones and the kind that wore boots and smirks, from circling her door. The dust burned her eyes as she walked, and she prayed under her breath, not for miracles because she knew better by now, but simply for the strength to take one more step. It was then, as the storm howled louder, that the sound of hoofbeats, steady, unhurried, confident, cut through the chaos like a quiet promise that something was about to change, something she didn't have the words for. She looked up, squinting through the grit, and saw him, a tall cowboy on a clay-red horse, a wide-brim hat low over his eyes, shoulders broad beneath a worn duster, the kind of man who moved like he belonged to the land itself. He swung down from the saddle with a deliberate grace that seemed impossible for a man his size, tied his horse with a slow patience that spoke of habit and discipline, then straightened, his gaze landing on Anna and her children with a softness that shouldn't have fit the hardened lines of his jaw. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Cole Archer, a drifting ranch hand, known from Wyoming to Texas for his quiet loyalty and the dangerous speed of his draw, a man who never stayed long in any one place and never walked away from someone in need, even if they weren't ready to admit they needed help. Cole watched Anna struggle with the sack slipping down her shoulder, watched the baby wail against her neck and the wind batter her skirt, and something inside him shifted the way, winter ice cracks under the first touch of thaw. He stepped forward, boots crunching through dust, and said in a low, powerful voice that somehow cut through the storm, like it had been waiting its whole life to be heard, "Ma'am, let me carry you now." Anna froze, not out of fear, but disbelief, and for a moment she simply stared at the stranger, this man with eyes like storm-washed earth, steady and unshaken. She was used to pity, used to townsfolk giving her sympathetic glances from behind their curtains, used to men offering help with strings attached, always with the smell of whiskey or desperation lingering on their breath. But this man, this cowboy, looked at her not with pity but with respect, as if he saw her not as a burden or broken thing, but as a woman who had been carrying too much for far too long. I'm fine," she managed, though her voice cracked as the flour slipped again and Cole reached out, catching the bag easily in one large hand before it hit the dirt. "Ain't no shame in needin' a hand," he said gently, and something in his tone, steady, grounded, almost protective, brought tears to her eyes before she could stop them. The children huddled close, instinctively sensing the shift in the air, and Isaac stepped forward, trying to put himself between his mama and the stranger. Cole noticed the boy's protective stance and gave him a slow nod of respect that made Isaac straighten with a mixture of pride and confusion. "Name's Cole Archer," the cowboy said, still calm, still watching them like he wasn't going anywhere until he knew they were safe. "Storm's picking up. Let me walk you home." Anna swallowed, torn between pride and exhaustion. But when the wind nearly ripped the shawl off her shoulders, she finally gave a small nod, and Cole gently lifted the flour sack to his chest, motioned for the kids to walk beside him, and shielded them with his body as they made their way through the churning dust. Every few steps he glanced at the children, checking their footing, watching for fear, and when the baby began to cry louder, he hesitated only briefly before offering, "If you want, I can carry the little one too." Anna hesitated, then handed the baby, tiny, pale, trembling, to Cole, who cradled the child like he'd done it 1,000 times. It shocked her, the tenderness in that rough man's hands, the way her baby instantly settled, small fingers curling around the fabric of his coat. They reached her small, battered homestead a mile outside town, the porch sagging, roof patched with whatever scraps she could salvage after the last storm. Cole's jaw tightened at the sight, though he said nothing. Instead, he helped her and the children inside, set the flour carefully on the counter, and waited as Anna lit the lamp. The warm glow revealed the truth she had hoped to hide. Cupboards nearly bare, floorboard splitting, blankets thin and worn. Cole took it all in quietly. Then he turned to her, pulling off his hat, and said in a voice that felt like the ground itself, promising steadiness, "You ain't alone anymore, Anna May, not if you don't want to be." She stared at him, confused, breath caught somewhere between hope and fear. He continued, "I lost folks too. Know what it feels like to carry more than a body ought to." The children gathered behind their mother like little shadows, listening. Cole looked at each of them, the hungry faces, the tired eyes, and something fierce and protective sparked inside him. "Let me help," he said simply. "Let me carry you now." Anna didn't know this cowboy, didn't know his past or his story, but something about the way he said those words, steady, certain without expectation, felt like a hand reaching into the darkness she'd been drowning in for months. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply stood there, trembling, as the wind howled around the little cabin and the cowboy waited, patient, quiet, unshaken, and somewhere deep inside, she felt the first fragile shift of hope. The storm died down by morning, leaving the plains washed in pale gold, sunlight and the scent of damp earth rising from the grass, and Cole Archer, true to his quiet nature, had already chopped a pile of firewood taller than Anna's waist before the children even woke. His coat lay draped over a fence post, his shirt sleeves rolled up around strong forearms as he worked, with the kind of focus that came from a lifetime of labor, not because someone expected it of him, but because that was the only way he knew how to live, with purpose, with steadiness, with hands that built instead of destroyed. When Anna stepped onto the porch with her hair braided and her eyes still swollen from tears she hadn't meant to shed, she froze at the sight of the woodpile, at the smell of biscuits cooking inside the cabin, at the quiet miracle of waking up and realizing for the first time in months that someone else had risen early to take care of things before they crushed her. Cole turned when he heard her footsteps, wiping sweat from his forehead as he gave her a small smile. Not the kind of smile men gave widows out of pity or charm, but the kind a man gives when he's exactly where he wants to be. "Mornin', Anna May," he said, voice low and gentle. She opened her mouth to respond, but her throat tightened, because no one, not a single soul,